I never actually bought this with a specific task in mind, but the 4.5-inch grinder in particular is such a versatile tool that I just had to have one. Now I can cut out some of the small areas of rust in my van and get it ready for welding. I can even grind off the old chipped and flaky paint from my gym equipment and give them a respray, or rake the old mortar from the brickwork at the front of my house ready for repointing. See what I mean about a versatile tool? I paid $49.99 for mine from Screwfix. Now there's the model number for anyone interested. Worth mentioning, if you search that model number and add a K and a D to the end, you'll get the same grinder, etc. But also included will be a Makita carry case. Currently Travis Perkins seems to be offering the best deal at the moment. Theirs is £57.60. Here's a little freebie they've thrown in, a metal grinding disc. Better than a poke in the eye of a shitty stick, I suppose. There's not much to these instructions, and I suppose that's a lot to do with a grinder being a very basic bit of kit, despite it being such a versatile tool. But these were fairly well translated and easy enough to follow, which is becoming a bit of a rarity if I'm being honest, especially some of the bits I've bought lately where the translation is shocking or just plain wrong. So as you can see, there's a spec label showing things like power, date it was made, where it was made, etc. Straight out of the box, and it looks, and more importantly feels like it's a quality product that's been well put together. I'm definitely a fan of Makita's blue and black colouring. Why Makita then? Well, believe it or not, it wasn't just a case of eeny meeny miny mo down my local DIY centre. I did actually do a bit of research, which whittled it down to Makita, Metabo and Bosch, for my particular budget that is. I couldn't get a Metabo. The Bosch was a real temptation, but what swung it was I'd owned another Makita tool and was happy with that. So I guess brand loyalty won through in the end, as simple as that. This then is the wheel guard. This is your side grip or handle, whatever you want to call it. And finally, the lock nut wrench. And here's everything from the box all laid out. In case it's not obvious, just showing here that the handle can be mounted either side of the grinder. Quick demo then of the shaft lock for installing and removing accessories here. Press on the black button, that's pretty much all the instructions told to do. What they don't say is that you probably need to rotate the spindle with your free hand until you feel it engage and lock. And this is where the lock nut wrench is used. That's the lock nut. And that's the inner flange. Now I'm pointing to notches on the bearing box. You align the notches on the bearing box with the protrusions I'm pointing out on the wheel guard band. You then rotate the wheel guard so that it's fitted on the grinder so that the closed side always points to you when you're using it. Now to tighten the screw on the wheel guard and secure it in place. I'd much prefer the lever type clamp for toolless adjustments, but I suppose that's reserved for the higher spec models. I think it's worth noting that in the instructions, Makita state that this open face wheel guard is for grinding applications only. For cutting, they reference a closed face wheel guard, meaning one that covers both sides of the disc. Obviously, this type of guard is much better than at protecting a user against flying projectiles created by a disc shattering at high speed. The inner flange on this model only ever goes onto the spindle one way, that is with the indentation or cutout side on first, and make sure it's properly seated. The lock nut is different though, with a raised centre on one side that goes face up or face down depending on the type and or thickness of the disc. The run switch is spring loaded and will return to off when released, that is unless it's locked into the continuous use position. To start the grinder, thumb the rear of the slide switch forward. For continuous running, thumb the slide switch forward and simultaneously press on the front of the switch to lock it into position. To disengage, press and release the rear of the slide switch. To avoid losing it and to make sure it's unplugged for when I change discs, I'm cable tying the lock nut wrench to the power lead close to the plug end.